God designed us to be learners. However, much of our learning and discipleship today regarding the church, current affairs, and theology has been reduced to pithy sayings and viral tweets. Just Say It seeks to help Christians go deeper on church, theology, scripture, and current issues in our world. I'm Chase Davis.
And I'm Matt Patrick. And join us and other guests for a monthly conversation on the topics that are impacting Christians in the church here in Colorado. You can expect candid conversations on the topics ranging from church attendance during ski season to Spurgeon's view of the atonement. All right, well, welcome to another episode of Just Say It from the Well Church. Today, really excited. We've got a guest with us, and normally it's just Chase and I, and you guys hear from us enough. We try to sprinkle in a few people that have influenced us a lot and been important to us in our ministry here at the Well. And so we have one of the members and the leader of Crosspoint Ministries. We've been working with you guys for about 7 years now, I think. I think that sounds about right.
Sounds right. I mean,
it feels like 20, but
It feels like 20, yeah. Counseling us, making us better, and really, if you don't like us, then you can take it to them.
You must not like us.
This is the guy.
No, yeah, he's told us everything to do, so it's all his fault. But this is Cliff with Crosspoint Ministries. Cliff, why don't you take a second and maybe just introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Share a little bit about Crosspoint before we dive into our topic here today.
Sure. Well, glad to be here and thankful for the opportunity to just chop it up with these guys, which is usually what we do when we come to Boulder. And Crosspoint is, I like to say Crosspoint's an advocacy group. We are a team of people who advocate for people who advocate for people.
Oh, wow.
And primarily that's pastors. We advocate for pastors and Christian leaders for their spiritual health, their relational health, and just resilience in ministry. And so that's really the focus. Crosspoint was started about 25 years ago by my mentor, whose name is Rich Plass. And Rich Plass and Jim Cofield were the guys that came out all those years ago. And
for our intervention.
Yes.
That's what the bill said.
Yeah, intervention.
The invoice was, yes.
And I have been with Crosspoint now for about 4 years, and my wife has been working with them for about 10.
Okay.
So she was working with them back when they came here. She was their admin support, kind of behind the scenes. And then Rich and Jim had mentored me and my wife Sally for many years, and then back in 2019 asked us to take the reins. And so our vision is to kind of take it into the next season of ministry and kind of move it from kind of a personality-driven organization, which was Rich and Jim doing amazing work with a ton of different people like you, and then build it out and really leverage all the people they've poured into, like you, and build something that kind of is a legacy to their hard work, but that has greater impact and kind of compounds or expands exponentially what they've done. So that's what we're doing, and slowly but surely. And one of the things I love about having taken it from them is that they entrusted me with relationships where they had a ton of equity, like what they had with you guys, and you guys have by proxy trusted me, and I've been able to stay with it and learn from you all and be inspired by you guys and the work that you're doing, but also get to continue that work and continue to learn and grow and help more people. So the Well has been your impact on not just Crosspoint and on by partnering with us. And by partnering, I just mean, we've helped you. Mm-hmm. Crosspoint's helped you. But also you've helped Crosspoint grow and learn and expand, especially through the transition of leadership, which has been a huge thing. And so your church, the Well, has helped hundreds of churches nationwide just by your continued partnership with us. And so I just want to take a moment to say to the Well at large, thank you for that. Yeah. And specifically, thank you to you two guys for your continued trust and support and allowing us to come and speak in and being vulnerable in relationship with us, being honest and letting us. Today, Matt was like, Cliff, all right, if you're the pastor at the Well, what are you doing? And that kind of question, as silly as it might sound, is a vulnerable question. because he really intended for me to speak in, and then you guys listened, and we talked about it for a couple hours. And that was great. So really thankful for that, but glad to be here. Yeah.
Well, we have been talking for several hours already before this, so hopefully we're not out of words yet. I know I'm not. I'm never out of words. I'm worried about Chase.
I'm just going to sit over here.
So since I have plenty of words, Chase, why don't you kind of kick us off with what we wanted to talk about with Cliff here today in the areas that we think might be helpful for our church, our community, churches in Colorado.
Yeah, I think what would be most helpful and kind of what we've been thinking about is you work with a lot of different churches, pastors, and we've had you teach workshops at our church, our senior leaders at our church, all sorts of stuff. So you know us, but you also know a lot about a lot of different churches. That's a lot to carry, in your role. But
so we want you to share about all the other churches and what
so
they're
that you
doing
feel
wrong.
better about yourself.
Yes.
I have learned competitive comparison really is the antidote to all of our problems.
is it really? Yeah,
Yes.
more of that.
Just compare ourselves to everyone else,
Okay, great.
and we'll feel good.
Yeah, okay,
Great.
cool. That's what I'm already doing.
This is an opposites podcast.
I think the most helpful thing maybe for our church, for our listeners, I'm just thinking about all of you out there listening, is like our church is in a unique season, a unique place. We're about to move into a building. We're in Boulder, Colorado, which is its own little ecosystem, the Republic of Boulder. But what's kind of happening as you think about the last few years have been fairly intense for a lot of churches. A lot of churches are people are self-sorting. They're choosing churches based on some unique things that maybe they weren't choosing before, whether it's politics or other things. What are you sensing in the church, broader church culture? I'm assuming only America is where you work, but what are you sensing in the broader church culture in America that are major issues that keep coming up, that keep resurfacing over the last few years?
Well, it's a big question, and we could certainly talk about that for hours. I would say this just at the outset, though. One of the lines that we say a lot, you guys have heard us say hundreds of times at Crosspoint, is that the quality of our lives depends upon the quality of our relationships. And so when it comes to the crises over the last few years and just kind of the in-your-face, can't get away from it, conflict, just it's everywhere. It has put a lot of people in, stressful situations where their relational integrity was in question. Like it put strains on our relational, our relational boats have been through some storms. And so the integrity of our relational systems have really been put to the test. And so, if those relationships weren't quality relationships that were built on truth, beauty, and goodness, which, take us to love, if they're not built in that space, then that's going to affect the quality of life. And so a lot of the conflict we see is just the natural reaching of every human, reaching for love, reaching to try to find God, and doing it in their own power. And that conflict that's been created is really the testimony to just the lack of healthy relationship that we have in our culture. We settle for a lot of contact with people, especially because we live in the internet age, and we settle for contact rather than connection. And that has all been it's in our face. You can't deny the fact that relationships are weak. And so I think fundamentally, the curse is being experienced in a way that's just, it's just caused a lot of relational pain.
Right.
And the curse has been experienced relationally for a long time, but I think maybe our culture had just been kind of resting easy in a sense, and we saw the curse more in things like sickness or illness or death, and certainly COVID, was a sign of the curse. But I think just also the political polarization has been really really relationally painful for a lot of people. Best friends, right? Like not talking because of a mask.
Right.
pastors who have been leading churches for years, decades, investing their lives into the people who make choices and decisions, and half the church leaves because they don't like it.
Right.
And it really put relational connection to the test. And so we've kind of had to just face the music, you know. The chickens came home to roost, and man, it's been kind of a mess, you know, a relational mess. And if you haven't been touched by the relational pain of the last 10 years, well, you're probably you're sleeping or something. I mean, I don't know how you escape it.
Right. I've thought about moving to the woods, you know, just maybe that's a great way to
well, I
to
mean,
escape
back
it.
in the day, right? That's what some people did. Like, that's what we do. We move out to the desert. And, you know, I've thought about that, you know, what that one guy wrote the book, right? Benedict option. Like, let's just move out to retreat to the hills.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think there is something to the idea of needing to disengage in order to sort of re-engage. But at the same time, man, even if you did, you wouldn't be able to escape the loss, you know? Because, I mean, if you move to the woods, like, you're leaving your friends.
Yeah.
So you can't escape it. It's it's in our faces.
Yeah. What I think about with all of this is the last few years have caused people to trust major government systems less or more, or, you know, or relationships. It seems to me that trust is a big part of this. Is what is true, what is not, where do you get your information, what's right, what's wrong, so on and so forth. And it seems that as I talk to pastors a lot, and I know we've experienced this in our own church to our own extent, is this idea around, can I trust you? Or a decision you made in regards to, it could be something like masking, or it could be even a theological thing. You know, I sense this in our church as we grow up and we change. Thank God we're a different church than we were when we started playing this when I was, 26 years old, you know, and I'm almost 40 now. And so it's different. And so you can kind of see when with change, but on top of everything that's going on in the world, there's a slowness to trust, or it's easy to mistrust quickly. Do you think that's a fair estimation of what's going on?
Easy to mistrust. Yeah. I mean, I would say that, I would say maybe more fundamentally, like, I think a lot of people, what they thought was trust is like, maybe that's not what it was. It was more just
What do you mean by that?
It was more, it wasn't real. It wasn't like authentic. It had never been put to the test.
Okay.
And so what they thought was like, this is a trusting relationship, was actually just a comfortable relationship where you scratch my back, I scratch yours, and somehow that equals trust.
So more transactional than trust.
Totally transactional, 100%. And so that, as soon as the transaction, you know, like, is a little off, there's no questions. It's just like you're out, you know, because there's not really much holding the relationship beyond just this constant, you know, back and forth giving and taking. And I mean, the giving and taking is part of relationships. Like, that's true. All relationships are a giving and receiving of love. That's required. However, if the trust at some level has to be tested to be authentic. And so I think what we've seen in the testing of it has been just kind of a wake-up call that maybe what we thought was authentic is not really authentic.
Yeah.
Chase loves the word authentic.
It's his favorite word. He told me that at lunch.
Authentic. Yeah.
Muy authentic.
I'm very authentic.
When I can't help it. You're nothing but raw who you are, Chase. It's what we love and hate about you.
It's true. It's true. I've been told.
Yeah. I mean, more on that, I guess, would just be, I think in some sense, we've all been, you know, everybody's been betrayed by somebody. Like, whether, you know, we could play the comparison game and say, well,
whose is worse?
Right? Yeah. But we've learned to deal with betrayal, and learning to deal with betrayal is is tightly bound to learning to trust. And so if we have a way of dealing with betrayal that we've learned through the years, and most of us learned that very early on in life. Mom and dad did the best they could. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they really hurt us, but maybe they did the best they could, and that still didn't give us everything we needed. And so there's a betrayal in a sense that they didn't meet all of our needs, but still we learned to make up the difference somehow, some way. And I think what we're seeing now is just kind of the fruit of a culture that has never really, for a lot of the culture. I mean, I can't make blanket statements, and I'm not a cultural critic. That's not my normal job. So I keep saying culture like I know all about it. I don't know. I'm trying my best, but there's never been a resilience that's been built for so many people to dealing with betrayal. And so again, what they thought was just this beautiful, trust, or like everything's fine, we're comfortable, has now been put to the test. And there's not a real resilience in betrayal or in any kind of mistrust. Like you didn't give me what I want you to give me. So now I can't be in relationship with you anymore.
Right.
And instead of having a conversation about it, there's not a resilience enough to stay at the table and figure this out. Now it's like, I have to leave. I have to get out. I have to run. I have to change and go find a place where somebody's going to give me what I want. And that lack of resilience in the face of mistrust, or the face of betrayal, as I'm calling it, means that it's just evidence that maybe the ways we've learned to do trust are pretty jacked up. And I think that's the essence of the gospel is when I define what repentance is learning to trust. It's learning to trust again. It's coming back to the design that God made for us, which was, I have what you need. You can trust me. And, in our brokenness, in the fall, and as we develop over time, like so many people, me included, right? All of us, some way, we have ways of self-preservation. And man, let's face it, like our culture is freaking good at we're good. We're smart. We got so much technology that helps us be self-sufficient and preserve ourselves. Like we don't really need to deal with a lot of trust. And if we get betrayed, heck, we can just move on and go find somebody else. And that's a lot of what we're seeing, that lack of resilience in the face of brokenness, broken trust.
How do you help pastors, churches that have experienced a lot of this mistrust, a lot of suspicion, betrayal, if you want to heighten the terminology? How do you help them move into a place where they can trust again? Or what does it look like to either grow that resilience that you talk about or to trust again? How do you do that?
Yeah. Repentance is a process whereby we grow in confidence that God is who he says he is. Jesus did what he said he did. He died, he rose again, he ascended to heaven and is now advocating for us, the right hand of the Father. It starts with that confidence in that story, which then gives me a confidence in the fact that he is the author of my story too. So now I can sort of learn to be a self. And then in learning to be a self, I can engage in relationship with you. Well, that sounds like the great commandment to me. Love the Lord your God with all your heart. Love your neighbor as yourself. So in a sense, rebuilding trust is learning to live into the great commandment, which requires some integrated relational work. And by integrated relational work, that's maybe a buzzword, but
it sounds like psychobabble.
Yeah, but by integrated, I mean it has integrity.
Yeah, right.
And by integrity means it's multiple parts fitting together. God, me, and you. And so if I'm attending to my relational world with God, myself, and you, then that means it's going to have some integrity, which is going to mean it's going to be stronger to withstand betrayal. I work with couples sometimes that have dealt with infidelity or betrayal in that way. And we always have this analogy, this metaphor. And we have a basket. We call it the trust basket. And
Sounds cute.
yeah, it is cute. It has little marbles in it. It's
Did you
in my
bring
office.
one?
We'll just use this cup.
Oh, okay,
This
great.
is the trust cocktail glass.
You love using cocktail glasses.
I do. I drew one earlier on the board. So, there's a couple of things that are a part of this process. And what we often say is we trust people who do trustworthy things. Mm-hmm. And that's a true statement.
Sure.
And it puts the onus on maybe somebody who has broken trust. In other words, if I'm in your church and you're my pastor and you guys did something dumb and you broke trust, or maybe you didn't mean to, or I just didn't like what you did and now I don't trust you.
Sure.
I could say, hey, I'll trust you when you do trustworthy things. Well, that's putting the onus on you to now ask me some questions like,
What do you want me to do?
what do you need? Yeah. Like, what do you need from me?
Yeah.
Okay. And now if I don't have an answer to that question, my answer to that question is essentially the metaphor of me holding out the basket to you and saying, here's my basket. Can you please put some trustworthy deeds in it?
Sure.
Okay. Now, a lot of times we focus on, are you going to do it? Please do this. And we can use that as a manipulative tactic to get you to do whatever I want you to do. Because now I have the power in the relationship.
Yep.
We often miss the fact that there's something that's required for this trust to be rebuilt, which is me to have some strength in my arms to hold the basket, for me to know, for the basket itself to have integrity, to be built, to be able to hold what you're giving it, and for me to be able to keep it in the same place and not change its position every day.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow, if I keep it over here and you're coming back here to give me trust, you're like, well, you wanted me to put it here and now it's not there anymore.
Right.
So if this is the idea of like, love your neighbor as yourself. I have to attend to my own, I got to take some personal responsibility here to deal with my own hurt in this process and be able to have strong enough arms, clarity of mind, clarity of words and language to communicate to you and say, this is what I need. Not just like, I just need you to be nice to me,
Right.
Yeah.
Which
I want that. But what does that mean?
Yeah.
And a lot of times what that means is me having to actually sort through my own crap because a lot of my own stuff is informing this whole thing. And the reason why I move the basket all around.
Yeah.
Now, me saying that doesn't diminish the fact that I have hurt that, that makes me weak and not want to hold my basket up.
Right.
But at the same time, when we demand people be trustworthy who've broken trust, we got to understand that we have a role in that process too. And then you have a role. And if I can be clear with you and I can stay present to this process, then you can make some deposits. And then, if you keep making deposits and then you abandon the deposits and you lie to me, well, what's that going to do with the basket? Like, it's emptied again. It's like, now we got to do this thing again.
Right.
And we got to do that dance. And if you're married, that sounds like every day, like we're constantly working in that relationship. That's what makes a good, healthy marriage, is that we're able to hold that basket out, describe to our spouse, talk it out, work through things, and then do our best to fill their trust basket, So again, it sounds cute, but at the same time, there's a lot of actually rigorous, intentional work that's required from both parties to do that. And it takes a lot of self-clarity. And strength and intentional resilience to maintain that, rebuild it.
What do you do with, we've seen churches, or I know of pastors who have experienced that mistrust with their congregation, whether it's something as severe as infidelity or something simple.
Yeah.
But sometimes, pastors in churches can do this too, but I've seen from my vantage point, from my seat, churches seem to make up a lot of processes to rebuild trust. And they just seem like, well, okay, that's interesting invention. How do you discern?
Like they just kind of go with
They're like,
the wind today.
In order, they go with the wind, or they
weather,
make up, they're like,
it
we're going to bring in
changes.
an FBI agent to tear apart your hard drive. And we're going to do that in order to investigate your integrity. And I'm like,
No church would ever do that, would they?
yeah, they have. So I'm curious, how do you use biblical language to articulate, like, categories for trust that aren't just ideas based in kind of secular humanism and kind of what I feel, but how do you articulate it in a way that's biblically faithful, theologically true, to where people aren't just making things up as they go, just because sometimes what, holding out the basket, they almost, it seems, create a punitive process.
Sure.
To where they're trying to not just rebuild trust.
Yeah.
They're trying to make that pastor suffer.
Yeah.
Punish.
It's vindictive.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
almost like there's times when like a pastor messes up, big or small, that it's like, you must do these forms of penance for us to trust you again. And, it's an interesting cycle. And I think pastors probably do that with their people sometimes.
Yeah.
as
Absolutely.
well.
Oh, absolutely.
It
goes both ways.
It goes both ways. But it's like this weird moralistic pietism
Right.
that you kind of have in there where it's do these things and then we know you're good again. And that just doesn't feel gospel-y.
Biblical.
Yeah, biblical. That's a better word. He has more degrees than me.
Gospel-y.
Gospel-y.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the question about biblical language. I think you and I have talked about this sometimes in the past. Like, different people mean different things with that. So I'll just say my thoughts, and you can tell me if it's biblically, gospel-y enough.
Gospel-y.
What comes to my mind is Romans 12. And you don't get to Romans 12 without Romans 1 through 11. And Romans 1 through 11, how would you describe Romans 1 through 11?
The story of God's people, the story of God's salvation, what God has done to save people single-handedly, particularly in 9 through 11, kind of capping it out with the story of Israel, how he chooses people, what he has for his particular people, all that kind of stuff. So it's like a theological treatise of God's story of salvation.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And to put that in terms that I would tell my kids, it's the story of God's love for you.
Yeah.
Thanks. I needed that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's what's her name? Sally Lloyd-Jones wrote the Jesus Storybook Bible, which I've always appreciated. It's on our level, Matt.
Yeah.
And
you live in Kentucky.
Yeah,
where my family's from.
So anyway, she did an adult version of it, and it is called that, the story of God's love for you.
Sure.
And I think that's how I would describe Romans 1 through 11 too. Similar way that you did. That's what I learned in seminary. But it's this beautiful theological treatise to understand creation, fall, redemption, and all of that, under like in God's economy, like understanding how all that works. And then you get to Romans 12, and the basic idea is because of all that, right? It's how it starts. The old therefore. Mm-hmm. That's your biblical word, therefore.
Thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Therefore.
Now we can trust.
Yeah. Because of all of this, and then the next line is give your bodies to God. And so I think first and foremost, when it comes to this sort of how do we not just make this about what I'm feeling today, it's got to be giving your body to God. In other words, coming underneath the authority of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the creator of all things, like that you aren't God. You were made. You're created. And that means that there are you got to kind of like embrace your humanity. And a lot of times the whole moving the basket around and hiding it is because, we are in a controlling, anxious space where we are determining our safety, our significance, our competence, our control, our affirmation is all of those things we're preserving those on our own. And that's the definition of sin. Sin is the reactive mistrust that God isn't who he says he is, and I'm out here on my own. So giving your body as a living sacrifice to God means first like surrendering to his love and then living under his rule and reign. That's the first thing. And if that's not happening, then the whole basket building trust thing is going to look pretty jacked up.
Yeah.
I'm to kind of build off of that. As you're talking, I couldn't help but think it's something I've thought about, especially these last several years as a pastor. And I think it's important. One of the things we really have set out to do on the show is to kind of give people a bit of a window into what's going on in our brains. And so I think it's fair to share this, but I've been thinking a lot about when the Apostle Paul says, we gave you the gospel, we also gave you our very selves. And I've always had a big heart for pastors in general, just not because I am one myself. It's just, I think they're misunderstood people oftentimes. But I know very few pastors that don't live that out, actually. I think majority of them really, like, I want to give you the gospel, and then they give of them their very selves. And so there's this intense relational component that pastors have with their people that I don't know if the church has done a great job in sharing that and being vulnerable with that appropriately to their people. And it's something that we've talked about a lot recently as with our elders and as we try to lead is how do we not just be like, here's the gospel. That is sufficient. That is great. I'm not degrading that. I don't want somebody cutting a clip being like, Matt's saying the gospel isn't enough, right? Or the gospel centered isn't enough.
Don't even.
But that sort of thing. But it's kind of like maybe talk a little bit about how people in ministry positions like us for our church, what are ways that you're seeing or that you would hope to see in churches where pastors are putting that on display for their people, that this is relational, this is deeply felt. We care a lot about you. We're not just giving you a message on Sunday. As important as that is, we're actually giving you our very lives, our very selves.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. I'll answer it, and you can tell me if my answer doesn't make sense. Then maybe it didn't make sense.
Okay, great.
One of the huge pieces of my work is working with men and women in ministry like you guys, and helping them embrace their humanity. You are so much of our culture, whether you're in ministry or not, is just dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing in one of two ways. It's dehumanizing in that we put inhumane expectations on people that they can never meet because they're humans, or we dehumanize them in the sense that we don't expect anything from them, and and they become dehumanized because we're not calling them to personal responsibility, right? One of the ways I talk about this spectrum is hero strategies and martyr strategies, right? Where these people down here just, and I shouldn't categorize them like that, because the truth is most of us go back and forth, right?
Sure.
You have martyr days and you have hero days. But both of those days are self-preservation days in which we're trying to live into dehumanizing expectations that we have either put on ourselves because of self-preservation. I've got to meet my needs on my own. I forgot Romans 1-11 today, and now I'm doing it on my own. Or because of expectations that someone else has put on me, and they forgot Romans 1-11 today, and I'm not allowed to be human now in this relationship. So what I often try to help do is help those men and women be the humans that they are. And one of the main things we talk about is, that humans are dependent and they're in need. And so we got to find language to talk about those needs. And the language that we talk about are those 5 words: safety, significance, competence, control, and affirmation. And a lot of the giving and receiving in the trust basket that's happening is really about safety, significance, competence, control, and affirmation.
Gotcha. Okay.
So those needs give us language to know how we stay out of the hero martyr dehumanization of each other that ends in that really feeds the mistrust and kind of keeps us on edge all the time and living in our self-preservation, sin, and those needs invite us back into trust, into because our need for safety and significance and competence and control and affirmation, those aren't the result of the fall. Those were Those are the result of being created,
Right.
made in the image of God, and we're made good. And being made good in the image of God is a beautiful thing. And so a lot of the work we're doing is helping pastors kind of live into their own humanity. So then model that and invite their congregations to do the same. So they have reasonable expectations of their congregations. Their congregations have human reasonable expectations of them. And then we hit COVID-19. And then it's like, hey, we're in relationship with humans.
Right.
So we don't do this dehumanizing
Stuff.
junk.
Yeah.
Like it's something else. We do something else. We're Christians, and they will know we are Christians by our love. And what we saw a lot was through this time was even in, the churches who claimed that they got it all right. Well, maybe, I don't know. But a lot of times what they did was they just found a comfortable space, and people went to churches that kind of matched their kind of dehumanization. So
Sure.
that they went to hero churches or they went to martyr churches, but they found a place that made them feel good in their self-preservation strategies rather than truly calling them, like inviting them back into being human together and learning how to live with each other in harmony, in diversity, in difference of thought, in difference of feelings, difference of stories, difference of opinions. And the only way to do that is to keep the main thing, which is God's kingdom, where what God wants done gets done, Romans 1-11. Then we get the beautiful community of Romans 12. But I'll just say this real quick. Romans 12, give your body to God because of all he's done for you. Let them be holy living sacrifices, the kind he will find pleasing, acceptable. This is your reasonable act of worship, or this is truly the way to worship God. Then it says, and I'm reading from the New Living Translation, forgive me.
Wow.
I know,
Yikes.
I
Cut
know,
this.
guys.
Yeah.
I know.
Clip this out.
But this is the best translation of Romans 12, in my opinion.
Okay.
All right, all right.
We'll
Don't copy the behaviors and customs of the world, which are dehumanizing,
sure.
but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think, which means actually a neurobiological reality, which means we have to do very intentional work. We don't change the way we think by just going to sleep and getting up in the morning and hoping for the best. Like, it takes work. It takes intentionality. It takes prayer and surrender. And it also takes risk and failure. Then you'll learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Because then Paul says, as the pastor, because of the privilege and authority that God has given me in this role, I give you this warning. And I don't think he's giving this warning as if it's not applying to him. I think he's saying this is the warning for all of us. Don't think you're better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves. Measure yourselves by the faith or the trust that God has given us. Just as our bodies have many parts and each part has a special function, so it is with Christ's body. Many parts of one body, we all belong to each other. That's, to me, the picture of what it looks like to rebuild the trust that's often been broken in our culture. But it requires Romans 1-11 first, living under the authority of that, giving your body to God and doing the work of finding a new way to trust.
That makes
Repentance.
sense. Yeah. When you think about some of this, you've talked about personal responsibility several times. And we live kind of in an age where victimization and being a victim is kind of taught in a lot of public schools. You got to find your identity, your self-expression. People have truly been victims, so this isn't to diminish the reality of that, but it's very in vogue right now to kind of lean into I'm a victim. You know, whether it's your family, your skin color, your social status, how much money you make, whatever it is. There's a lot of oppressive narrative. So what does it look like in churches that you're seeing? How do you help churches live into their own humanity, take responsibility, and reject those kind of that victim status? So they don't live there, because that's a terrible way to live. I mean, that's not the way God designed us. So how do you
can't mature? You can't mature if you never grow up out of a victim space. Like, a victim mentality never matures. You can't grow.
Right.
So, I mean, to your point, even in the hero martyr spectrum I was talking about a minute ago, that's dehumanizing. You could also say like the other polarization that's often is victim and abuser. Like if every face you see is either a victim or an abuser, it's a dehumanizing thing to do, because that's not like everybody's got an inner victim and everybody's got an inner abuser. Like, like just go to the playground. Like it's happening all over the place.
Yeah.
So I think we have to start with, you're right about that, Chase. Like everybody does have pain. And one of the challenges we face, which you and I've talked about before, is not being cynical about that.
Right.
Cynicism is a barrier for us to see change in our culture. And so we have to guard against that. Cynicism is just because of our own pain and our own frustration, kind of our own fears that things are never going to get better. So we can kind of become cynical. And so we have to have hope that things can change, and have an imagination that it could get better. I know that we look at the Bible and we know that, hey, the world is there's still darkness and things are going badly. But at the same time, because of the gospel, if we don't have hope that people can change, then what the hell are we doing?
Sure.
So we got to have that hope. So I'll say that just at the outset. The second thing would be that the only way to heal as a victim is to express or to understand have language for the pain. So we live in obligation or compulsion or obligation to our victim parts that we all have, but they control us until we give them a voice. Because once they have a voice, that's why God gave us language to talk about and say what we need, right? You're going to have a baby in a few months, and that baby is going to come out of the womb
screaming,
again, according to God's design,
right?
Like unless there's something that's not the way it's supposed to
right,
be,
yeah.
It's going to come out screaming, which is saying I need, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But then if you don't give the baby what it needs, then we would call it a victim,
right?
And so there's a deprivation that we've all suffered, and we have to find language for that. And as we grow and mature, we begin to find language. And sometimes our families shut that language down. Like, no sadness here. Don't cry, I'll give you something to cry about. That kind of thing.
I've never heard that.
Right. So,
I might have said that too.
Right? Like, suck it up, Like, we don't
Sounds like our last members meeting.
we don't have time for that
Joking.
anymore.
It's a joke.
Right. But at the same time, it's like our culture often shuts down that language. So many times the overreaction, some of the time, the overreaction to the victim mentality is simply because there's been such a silencing or suppression of people's pain.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have to understand that some of the overreaction is kind of, it's unfortunate. It's natural though. So if we can give people language, teach them language for feelings. That's why God gave us the Psalms. Read the Psalms. Like, there's victim all over that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we're not denying that, but that needs a voice to be expressed. And once it's expressed, and then it's those feelings, which are physiological indicators of our relational, psychosocial needs, safety, significance, competence, control, and affirmation. When those feelings find language to be expressed and connected to a need, then we have the opportunity to do something about it, to make a choice.
Yeah.
And take personal responsibility.
That's good.
That's how we kind of get out of that cycle. Otherwise, we start with victim, hero, martyr, and then the hero martyrs get tired, and then they become villains and hurt people. You've heard that.
Yep. Yeah.
And then they hurt others. So in that little cycle, call it the triangle of death. Like it kills us.
Yeah.
That's good. So we're about to time, but one thing I thought would be fun just to hear from you on, and it's connected to all of this, but
this has been heavy, guys. Okay, I know it's like
deep.
Has it?
Wow.
Chase is like, this is how I live. I'm like,
felt a little heavy.
I just need to tell more jokes.
I thought there was going to be some more jokes. Yeah.
So
we can talk about the black pill. Like he's saying language that's like right up my alley with black pills and white pills and red pills and.
So, anyways, back to what I was going to say. No, I think it would be great to hear from you, Cliff. Maybe if you could have maybe an encouragement to our church after, all that we've been through. I mean, that we're trying to get into a building.
Yeah.
We're meeting in a bar currently. Chase and I have changed a lot and tried to lead, all that kind of stuff. If there could be an encouragement to our church, and then maybe an encouragement, if you would, like to us and the leaders of the church, of something that you would just say, hey, this would be a really important thing to keep at the forefront of your mind going forward as a community here in Boulder.
Yeah.
I didn't tell you I was going to say that. I just thought of that.
It's good though. I'm going to tell you what.
You can be as blunt as you want. The podcast is called "Just Say It."
Here's what I'm going to say.
You better just say it.
I'm just going to say it.
Just say it.
This is a phrase one of my mentors says to me a lot, and I will say it to you, and then I'll try to unpack it just briefly because I don't want to take too much time. But the line is, "You got to be angry to be great." And I think what often you don't get into a building in Boulder without having some amount of anger, and by anger I mean you have to stay in the fight.
Sure.
Like you guys have been fighting for it. It's not. I mean, it's been a battle. You don't plant a church without a healthy dose of anger, and it's anger for something. It's not rage against something. And that's a kind of a semantics pet peeve of mine, is that I want us to preserve the word anger for a healthy, as I was saying today, violent energy that lives in our bodies. That helps us be aggressive on the mission. Jesus didn't get to the cross apart from anger. Now, he had a lot of fear, and he, as a human, expressed that fear in his prayer to the Father right before the cross, right? Like, hey, if there's another way, like, can we do that the other way? And I mean, I'm sure you guys at the well have prayed many times, hey, if there's another way that's easier for us, can we have that way?
Yeah.
Like maybe we should just move to another city and do this thing somewhere else, because
said that.
This is hard.
Sure.
Right? God, if there's another way. So I would just encourage you to cry out with your fear, but also remember that God gave us anger to get us through. Fear gets us ready for the mission. It makes us wise, so we're not idiots when we're out there. So fear gets us ready, and it helps us be wise to the threats that we're going to face. But a healthy dose of anger is what's going to get us through, help us be great. So I would just say, if you're not angry, ask yourself why. Like if you don't know what you're angry for, and in this case, I think you guys are doing this realignment work around the mission and vision. Basically, you're answering the question, what are we angry for here? So you got to be aligned on your anger, and that healthy anger, when it gets going and it gets kind of a momentum together in a community of faith, man, like that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it doesn't take a lot of people for that collective anger to really do beautiful things. I mean, but that's what fuels passion. Our passion is defined as our willingness to be in pain for something that matters more than the pain. So that would be my encouragement to the well, is like, make sure you know what you're angry for. All this talk of the gospel is really like, we gotta to stay on mission. We gotta stay in touch with the anger that we feel for the goodness and truth of beauty of God to be made known here on earth as it is in heaven. So stay connected to your anger, which is going to fuel your passion, because it's going to be painful. It's hard to live in this world, but we're willing to be in pain for something that matters so much more than the pain. And that kind of like overlaps, I think, to what I would say to you guys and the leaders. Like, I have truly been inspired by watching you two work through all that you've worked through, both in your church planting, church building, building buying, but also just in your relationship. You know, we just talked about some of that today. And I think if you can stay in touch with that anger and that passion, that builds in us this resilience to when the breaks happen, when the betrayals or the mistrust comes up, we work through it. We can get through it. We've been through some stuff. We've fought some battles together. There's a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a family sense in that we're bonded together beyond more than just we agree on politics.
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
So I would just stay with that. You got to be angry to be great. And I think we get that in the person of Christ, seeing his anger for the mission that the Father had given him. And he stayed with it, despite a lot of confusion, being misunderstood by his own family, people trying to trip him up, trick him. He just kept coming back. And it was, I think, in all of us, that very presence of Christ now, by the power of the Holy Spirit, exists. We have access to the same passion that Jesus had as he went through the cross and he suffered. We have access to that same passion and the same power that raised him from the dead.
Amen.
It's good.
That should be our byline for our church, the Well, an angry church.
Got to be angry to be great.
Yeah, I'll put that on my mirror. I don't think I'm going to put that on the church sign.
No, you'll be misunderstood for sure with that one.
Yeah.
But I think in this context, we can say it, Like, and again, I just would say there's a difference between anger and rage.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what we call anger is actually a fight response to something that we're afraid of.
Sure.
And if that's what you're doing, if you're expecting rage to get you through, you're going to run out of energy.
Yeah.
You're going to get tired and
Yeah.
you're going to give up.
Yeah.
Or you're going to kill somebody. And that's not going to be good.
Not good.
Yeah, murder in the church is bad. Very bad. That's my line for the whole thing.
There you go. That's funny.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you want to close this out, Chase?
Yeah, this was great, Cliff. Thanks
Thank
so much
you,
for spending
guys.
time with
Yeah.
us. We've obviously spent all day together, and this has been great. I mean, I really hope you who are listening have been blessed by this. If you have any questions, we can always receive them and then forward them on to Cliff. And like Matt said, you can blame a lot of things you don't like on Cliff as well. He'll be our scapegoat. But we've been so blessed by Crosspoint. Where can people go to find more resources from Crosspoint?
Our website, crosspointministry.com. It's not ministries.
Oh, our bad.
Plural.
Ministry.
It's like
All these
Revelations.
times. We haven't been able to
Yeah,
cash a single check because they're all made out to Crosspoint Ministries.
That explains it.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, no, crosspointministry.com. And there's some stuff there. Our three big buckets are what you guys know as intervention, right?
Sure.
And then we're really trying to see the needle move to prevention. And that's been the work we've been doing with you guys since that intervention.
Sure.
So prevention, intervention, and then education. We do some educating, helping people who are in pastoral care roles or just wanting to learn how to do more healthy, balanced relational care in the church. We have an education piece as well. So you can find more about us there. The Relational Soul is a great book that was written by my mentors and the founders of Crosspoint, Rich Plass and Jim Cofield. You can find that wherever you buy books.
That's great.
But yeah, great to be here with you guys. Thanks again for having me and let me chat it up.
Yeah, for sure, man. Thanks for being here. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Just Say It. We'd love it if you would subscribe on YouTube, give us a great rating, hit that notification icon so you can stay up to date with our episodes. You can also subscribe anywhere podcasts are found. That way you can get that directly to your feed and share this episode with a friend. I'm sure you have a friend that's in a church that's experienced crisis, as most churches have in America, and this would be a great episode to share with them. But we will see you next time.